Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Our top stories tonight. 2 Hong Kong University professors call on the vaccine pass be lifted for younger adults. Extended East Rail line ramps up frequency on first working day, but passengers still packed like sardines. And China's economic slowdown worsens last month as society grapples with massive lockdowns. From the end of this month, all Hong Kongers aged 12 or above must be triple jabbed to eat at restaurants or visit certain premises. But 2 renowned public health experts feel the requirement is only necessary for people aged 60 or above. Joanna Ho talked to one of them.
In a commentary published in Mingpao newspaper, epidemiologist Ben Cowling and pharmacy professor Theo Chan from the University of Hong Kong are calling on the vaccine pass be exempted for people below 60 years old when they enter certain premises. They argued that, unlike the elderly, younger adults are relatively unlikely to die or develop severe symptoms after contracting COVID. Most young adults have either been double jabbed or developed immunity to the virus after a previous infection.
The reason to have a mandate is if you think it's essential to have almost a very high level of coverage. For example, in measles vaccine in children. But for COVID, we know the vaccines don't really stop infection. They're not that good at stopping transmission. Remember, we had a lot of infections in Hong Kong's 5th wave.
The experts also feel authorities should respect people's choice under the informed consent principle.
If the characteristics of COVID somehow change in the future, maybe becoming more severe in younger people, and also that having that knowledge, the vaccine coverage in young adults is too low and doesn't increase voluntarily, then I think in that situation, a mandate could be justified. But I don't see that happening.
佢哋受到感染之後呢，亦都係有機會係要住院啊。
Responding to the suggestions, health officials pointed out young COVID patients may still develop severe diseases and be hospitalized. Civil Service Chief Patrick Nip, who is in charge of the vaccination program, insisted no sunset date has been set for the scheme. He once again called on citizens to receive a 3rd dose. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
2 more people have contracted COVID after visiting a Kwun Tong private kitchen, taking the tally to 11. But most of the patients claimed that they were there for a business meeting and did not consume any food. Authorities are now investigating whether they had used karaoke equipment or mahjong tables found at Imperial Kitchen. This came as Hong Kong reported 234 new COVID infections, 42 of which were imported. A couple arriving from the United States tested positive on Saturday, 2 days after completing hotel quarantine. The Center for Health Protection will conduct genomic tests to find out if the 2 were infected locally. It was a relatively trouble-free experience for commuters taking advantage of the East Rail Line extension. Passengers hailed the convenience of crossing the harbor on a single train journey, although the time saving during the morning rush was less than advertised. Isaac Lee reports.
It was the first working day since the East Rail Line was extended to the other side of the harbour. While cross-harbour commuters can save precious time with the new routes, they first needed to squeeze onto a train, which now has 3 fewer cars than before, and therefore less capacity. That proved to be a challenge even before 8 a.m., as suggested by the loading indicator screen at Tai Wai Station, a major interchange for Ma On Shan residents. A red sign suggests the car is over 90% full. When the train arrived at Kowloon Tong, another interchange, some passengers got off. But the cars were filled again by passengers from the Kwun Tong line. It took us 21 minutes to travel from Tai Wai to Admiralty during the morning rush, 4 minutes more than the official estimate listed on the MTR Corporation's website. This lady who lives in Shatinwai praised the East Rail Line extension, saying apart from the time saving, she doesn't need to switch trains as often. Operations were generally smooth at Admiralty, now a mega interchange for 4 MTR lines. The railway firm pledged to deploy 400 extra staff along the East Rail Line in anticipation of a passenger surge. But there were also losers, namely the city's 2 franchised bus companies. There were visibly fewer people lining up for cross-harbour services in Hong Kong, where the East Rail Line used to terminate. But many commuters still opted for the bus, such as this man who explained that his destination was far away from an MTR station. Another commuter said it was down to personal preference, as he liked to take a seat on the bus and just relax. Exactly, HKIBC.
Next Digital's former Chief Operating Officer Chow Tek-kun was granted amnesty by the court to testify for a fraud case against his former boss, media tycoon Jimmy Lai. Chow, who's also a co-defendant, arrived at district court through a special entrance to testify as a prosecution witness. Lai and Wong the administrative director of the now-defunct Next Digital Group, which published Apple Daily, were accused of breaching a tenancy agreement with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation from 1998 to 2020. Lai and Wong pleaded not guilty. Chow will be heard in a separate hearing in July. The Consumer Council is calling on parents to choose snacks for their young children carefully after many samples were found to contain added sugars or salt. In another discovery, a few samples of sausages were found with harmful substances already banned overseas, but not in Hong Kong. Macy Mong reports.
Most people know sausages aren't the healthiest of foods, but the latest findings by the Consumer Council may lead some people to think twice. The watchdog tested 30 samples of the delicacy on their nutritional value and food safety compliance. 3 samples were detected with semicarbazide, or SEM, an indicator of the banned veterinary antibiotic nitrofurazone. In particular, the chicken franks by Valley Chef exceeded the European Union limit by 14 times. Apart from the EU, use of nitrofurazone in food-producing animals is also banned in the United States as well as the mainland. Council Chief Executive Gilly Wong urged people to gauge for themselves whether to consume these sausages. She also urged the government to update relevant local legislation by making reference to EU standards. Food safety aside, the watchdog stressed that most of the samples tested were high in sodium and half were high in fat.
Sausages are only good for occasionally light meals, but never a regular or main ingredient for daily meal. And to be mindful of the consumption size and frequency in order to avoid increasing risk of high blood pressure resulting from prolonged excessive intake of sodium.
The watchdog also reviewed 37 types of baby snacks, such as rice crackers, puffs, and cereals. Nearly 80% contained added sugars, which are not recommended for toddlers under 2 years old, according to British and American authorities. 3 in 10 samples contained added salts, which should be avoided by infants under 12 months old. The council pointed out that excessive and prolonged sodium and sugar intake could stunt bone growth for children and increase their risk of obesity. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Turning overseas, at least 1 person is dead and 5 others were injured after a man opened fire at a Taiwanese church in Southern California. The gunman was taken down by a group of churchgoers before he could do more harm. Just 1 day after a white teenager went on a racially motivated attack by gunning down 10 people at a grocery store in New York State. Another shooting unfolded on the other side of the United States. A man in his 60s and of Asian descent opened fire at a Taiwanese church at Laguna Woods, a small town in Southern California known for its retirement community. Gunfire ran out at around 1:30 p.m. when congregants were attending a lunch banquet after the morning service. As the gunman paused to reload his gun, the pastor knocked him down with a chair. Other people, many with military backgrounds, then tackled him and grabbed his weapons.
We believe a group of churchgoers detained him and hogtied his legs with an extension cord and confiscated at least 2 weapons from him. They undoubtedly prevented additional injuries and fatalities.
But a physician in his 40s were killed at the spot. He was not a regular visitor, but was accompanying his mother. 5 others, all of them elderly, were rushed to hospital for critical injuries. The massacre left residents in the Orange County suburb reeling in shock and dismay.
Zero crime here. Zero. From here to a couple of miles, there's nothing. We don't have car chasing, we don't have nothing. Now to hear this? I mean, I don't know what to say.
Authorities are investigating the motive of the shooter, who was believed to be an outsider. Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the United States, Xiaobi Kim, expressed grief and support for the Taiwanese American community on Twitter. China's COVID-0 policy is taking a heavy toll on its economy, with industrial output and consumer spending sliding to the worst levels since the pandemic began. Officials, however, remain optimistic about a speedy recovery. Chloe Feng reports.
As China remains determined to achieve dynamic zero COVID, its economy is paying the price. Consumer spending and industrial output last month plummeted to their lowest levels in over 2 years. In its regular briefing, the National Bureau of Statistics reported that retail sales plunged 11.1% year-on-year in April, the second consecutive month of decline. Industrial output unexpectedly fell by 2.9% year-on-year, while the unemployment rate edged up 0.3 of a percentage point. The only positive area was fixed asset investment, which saw an increase of 6.8% in the first 4 months of this year. But that was still lower than an expected 7% rise. Officials attributed the downward trend to an increasingly complex and grim international environment. A domestic COVID spike in March and April also sent dozens of cities, most notably Shanghai, into lockdowns, dampening spending while disrupting supply chains. But the Bureau remains bullish on China's high-quality development, insisting the negative impact will only be temporary.
With the phased result of epidemic prevention and control achieved, the policies and measures to stabilize the economy continue to take effect, and a gradual recovery of economic operation is in anticipation.
Financial authorities only announced yesterday that banks are allowed to further reduce mortgage interest rates for first-time home buyers. But many analysts describe the push to prop up the housing market as underwhelming. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
There is finally hope for Shanghai residents to emerge from a lockdown, which has entered its 8th week. China's financial hub is set to resume all social and economic activities over 3 phases next month. Vice Mayor Zhong Ming announced that 15 of 16 districts have achieved dynamic zero, with only 1 million people still locked down, roughly 4% of the city's population. Daily infections stood at 965, falling below 4 digits for the first time in 6 weeks. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 51 points. Top 10 active stocks. Meituan down $4.10, Tencent down $4.40, Alibaba up $2.40, and Kuaishou Technology up 55 cents. Sinuk up 2 cents, JD.com up 40 cents, and Ping An down 20 cents. Forex trading against Hong Kong dollar, euro is trading at 8.18, British pound 9.62, Canadian dollar at 6.07, and Australian dollar 5.43. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is up 3 points. On to the weather now. The fine weather returns as tomorrow will be dry during the day. Temperatures range between 20 and 25 degrees. Sunny on Wednesday, but expect some rain on Thursday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Monday night. Join us for more updates at 11. I'm Sarah Wong. Thank you for watching. Good night.